People say industrial glue is only for fixing broken furniture, but today, I used it to fix my rotting family tree. As the ambulance screamed outside my Seattle home, I sipped wine, watching my wife and son-in-law carried out literally bonded together. They thought they were hunters targeting a useless old man, but they had no idea that a $5 bottle of adhesive was just the beginning. Never provoke a man who holds the keys to the family safe. My name is Thomas Williams, and to the outside world, I am the definition of stability. At 48 years old, I serve as the Chief Financial Officer for Novatech Solutions, a massive virtual technology conglomerate that allows me to command nine-figure budgets from the quiet comfort of my home office in the suburbs of Seattle. I deal in risk assessment, asset allocation, and the cold, hard logic of numbers. In my profession, every variable can be controlled, every loss can be hedged, and every disastrous quarter can be predicted if you look closely enough at the data. I am a man of precision. However, inside the walls of my own two-story colonial revival home, my title meant nothing. To my wife of 25 years, Vanessa, I was simply an obstacle to excitement. Vanessa was 46, a woman who had aged with a desperate clawing need to remain 20. She spent more time at the Pilates studio and the cosmetic dermatologist than she did at home, and whenever our paths crossed in the kitchen or the living room, her eyes would glaze over with a mixture of boredom and mild contempt. She often told her friends on the phone loud enough for me to hear that I was dry. She said I was unromantic. She said I had become an old man long before my time, a creature of habit, who cared more about the fluctuations of the stock market than the beating heart of a woman. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps I had become boring. But I was a boring man who paid for the Lexus she drove, the vacations she took to Cabo with her girlfriends, and the designer wardrobe that filled 3 closets in our master suite. I absorbed her insults with the same stoicism I used to weather market crashes. I thought it was just the natural decay of a long marriage, the inevitable cooling of embers that had burned too bright in our youth. I was wrong. It was not a cooling. It was a diversion, the catalyst for the destruction of my life and the subsequent reconstruction of my dignity began with a snowstorm in the Midwest. I was scheduled to be in Chicago for a 3-day conference on digital currency regulation. I had kissed Vanessa goodbye that morning, enduring her half-hearted cheek offer, and driven to the airport. But nature had other plans. A massive blizzard grounded all flights to O'Hare. The trip was canceled at the last minute. Standing in the terminal watching the red "canceled" text blink on the monitor, I felt a strange urge. A younger, more foolish part of me thought this was an opportunity. I could go home early. I could pick up a bottle of her favorite Chardonnay and some takeout from the Italian place she liked. Maybe, just maybe, a surprise return would spark something. Maybe she would see that I could still be spontaneous. It was a pathetic thought, born of a desperate hope that I could fix a relationship that was already a rotting corpse. I drove back through the gray drizzle of a Seattle afternoon. The windshield wipers beat a rhythmic tempo that matched the anxious thumping in my chest. I pulled into our quiet tree-lined street at exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The neighborhood was silent, most of the residents away at their offices or picking up children from school. As I steered my Tesla toward the driveway, something caught my eye. It was a flash of metallic blue, parked not in the driveway, but around the back of the house, partially obscured by the large oak tree and the tool shed. I stopped the car at the curb, feeling a sudden cold prickle on the back of my neck. I knew that car. It was a blue Ford Mustang, a graduation gift I had helped finance for Jared. Jared was 26 years old. He was a personal trainer with more ambition than sense, and more importantly, he was the husband of my daughter Lily. My mind raced through innocent possibilities. Perhaps Jared had come over to fix something. He was handy with tools, unlike me. Maybe Lily was here too. But Lily was at work. She was a junior architect and her hours were rigid. Why would Jared be here in the middle of a Tuesday, and why was his car hidden behind the shed? I killed the engine and stepped out. I did not take my suitcase. I did not take the wine. I walked up the driveway with the soft, deliberate steps of a man approaching a wild animal. The front door was locked, but I had my key. I turned it silently, the well-oiled tumbler making no sound. The house was warm, smelling faintly of lavender and the expensive perfume Vanessa wore. Silence. Then, a sound drifted down from the second floor. It was a laugh. Vanessa's laugh. Not the shrill, irritated tone she used with me, but a throaty, girlish giggle I had not heard in 15 years. "Stop it, you represent trouble," she said, her voice muffled but clear. "You love trouble," a male voice replied. It was deep, arrogant, and unmistakably Jared's. My world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from my face, rushing to my feet, leaving me lightheaded. I gripped the banister of the staircase, my knuckles turning white. This could not be happening. This was a cliché. This was a bad movie plot. My wife and my son-in-law. The man who sat at my Thanksgiving table. The man who held my daughter's hand. I ascended the stairs. Each step felt like I was wading through quicksand. The sounds grew louder. The rustling of sheets. The wet, sickening sound of skin slapping against skin. The rhythmic creaking of the vintage oak bed frame that I had bought for our 10th anniversary. The door to the master bedroom was ajar, leaving a gap of perhaps 3 inches. I stopped outside my breath, caught in a throat that felt like it was filled with broken glass. I peered through the crack. The scene was etched into my retinas instantly, a tableau of betrayal so grotesque it almost looked staged. Vanessa was on the bed, her back arched, her hands gripping the headboard. Jared was behind her. They were naked, their bodies glistening with sweat, moving with an animalistic intensity that nauseated me. "Is this better than your little wifey?" Vanessa moaned, a sound that tore a hole through my chest. "Lily is a dead fish compared to you, Vanessa," Jared grunted. "She does not know how to take care of a real man." I stepped back, my back hitting the wall of the hallway. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to burst in there and strangle them both with my bare hands. I wanted to burn the house down. The rage was a physical thing, a hot magma bubbling up from my stomach, threatening to consume my rationality. But then something shifted. As I stood there trembling, my eyes fell on the hallway console table, where I had dropped my laptop bag earlier. Inside that bag was a small purchase I had made at the hardware store before heading to the airport. The sole of my favorite dress shoe had come loose, and being a practical man, I had bought a tube of industrial-strength adhesive to fix it myself rather than take it to a cobbler. Titan Bond. That was the name on the tube. The packaging boasted that it could bond rubber, metal, wood, and skin in seconds. It warned of permanent adhesion. It was industrial grade, designed for heavy machinery and construction, not for household repairs. I looked back through the crack in the door. On the vanity table right next to the entrance of the bedroom, and just a few feet from where I stood, was a bottle. It was a sleek, pink bottle with gold lettering. Velvet Touch Body Oil. Vanessa had told me it was a moisturizer for her dry skin. She had yelled at me once for trying to move it, saying it was expensive and delicate. But now seeing it there, open with the cap lying beside it, and seeing the sheen on their bodies, I knew exactly what it was. It was lubricant. High-end silicone-based lubricant. The noises in the room stopped briefly. "I need to wash up. I am sweating like a pig," Jared said, breathless. "Hurry back, Tiger. We have all afternoon. The old, boring bank account is in Chicago," Vanessa replied. I heard the heavy footsteps of Jared moving toward the ensuite bathroom, then the sound of the shower turning on. Vanessa followed him a moment later. "Wait for me. I want to rinse off too." The bathroom door clicked shut. The sound of running water filled the room, masking all other noise. The old, boring bank account. That was what she called me. The hot magma of my rage suddenly froze. It cooled instantly, into a sheet of ice, sharp and clear. The trembling in my hands stopped. My heart rate slowed down. I was no longer a husband. I was a CFO, facing a hostile takeover. I was a man analyzing a data set of betrayal and calculating the most efficient return on investment for my vengeance. I looked at my bag. I reached down and unzipped the side pocket. My fingers curled around the cold metal tube of Titan Bond. I moved. I slipped through the bedroom door like a ghost. The room smelled of sex and musk, a scent that would haunt my nightmares. But right then, I ignored it. I went straight to the vanity table. My movements were precise, practiced, steady. I picked up the pink bottle of Velvet Touch. It was about half full. I walked to the window, opened it quietly, and poured the slippery liquid into the flower planter outside. It took only seconds. Then, I uncapped the Titan Bond. The tube was large, containing 5 ounces of the strongest adhesive legal for consumer purchase. I squeezed the tube. The thick, clear gel oozed into the pink bottle. It looked exactly like the lubricant. It had the same viscosity, the same clarity. I squeezed until the tube was empty, filling the lubricant bottle to nearly the same level it had been. I recapped the Titan Bond and shoved the empty metal tube into my pocket. I placed the pink bottle back exactly where it had been, the label facing the same angle. I was out of the room in 10 seconds. I walked back down the stairs, my heart beating with a slow, heavy rhythm. I did not run. Running was for the guilty. I was not guilty. I was the hand of justice. I exited the front house, locked the door silently, and walked back to my car. I got in, started the engine, and released the parking brake. I drove the car down the street, turning the corner, and parked 2 blocks away. I sat there for 5 minutes watching the clock on the dashboard. I needed to give them time to finish their shower. I needed to give them time to get back to the bed. I needed to give them time to reach for that bottle. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. Thomas Williams stared back at me. He looked the same, but his eyes were different. The warmth was gone. The hesitation was gone. There was only a flat, shark-like gaze. I put the car in gear and drove back toward my house. This time, I would pull into the driveway openly. I would slam the car door. I would walk up the steps with heavy feet. I would whistle a tune. I was about to play the role of the surprised, loving husband returning home early to his beloved wife. It was going to be an Oscar-worthy performance. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw the upstairs curtains flutter. The trap was set. The players were in position. And I, the director of this tragedy, was ready to call action. I took a deep breath of the cold Seattle air. It tasted sweet. It tasted like retribution. I walked to the front door, unlocked it loudly, and shouted into the cavernous hallway. "Honey, I am home! The flight was canceled!" And then I waited for the scream. I walked into the kitchen with the casual air of a man who had nothing heavier on his mind than a light lunch. I placed my briefcase on the counter, loosened my tie, and decided that this moment required a fresh cup of coffee. I moved with deliberate slowness. I opened the cabinet, took out the bag of premium dark roast beans, and poured them into the grinder. The loud mechanical whirring of the blades shattering the beans was a comforting sound. It was the sound of routine. It was the sound of normalcy. To ensure my absolute plausibility as the oblivious husband, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my noise-canceling headphones. I slid them over my ears and tapped the playlist on my phone. Beethoven's Symphony No. 9 began to play. The Ode to Joy. It felt appropriate. I did not turn the volume up all the way, just enough to dull the ambient noise of the house, but not enough to miss the structural vibrations of a disaster unfolding. I stood there, watching the coffee drip into the carafe, counting the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. I imagined the scene upstairs. The water turning off, the towels drying skin, the amorous giggles, the reach for the pink bottle, the application, the pause, the realization that something was wrong. The realization that the smooth, silky glide they expected was actually a fast-setting industrial-grade polymer that cures with an exothermic reaction. That means it gets hot. Very hot. And then I felt it. It was not a sound at first, but a thud. A heavy, frantic impact directly above the kitchen ceiling. It was the kind of thud a body makes when it hits the floor in a panic. I slid one ear cup off. The scream that tore through the ceiling was not human. It sounded like a wild animal caught in a bear trap, a high-pitched, jagged shriek that shredded the air. It was Vanessa. "Get it off! Get it off! It burns!" "Oh God, it burns!" Then came the deeper guttural roar of Jared. "What is this? What the hell is this? I am stuck! I am stuck!" "You are hurting me. Don't pull. Do not pull!" Vanessa screamed again, her voice cracking with hysteria. I placed my mug down on the counter with a soft click. It was showtime. I sprinted to the bottom of the stairs, my face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. I took the steps two at a time, making as much noise as possible. "Vanessa!" I yelled, my voice booming. "Vanessa, what happened? Did you fall? I'm coming!" I reached the bedroom door. The screaming inside was now a cacophony of pain and confusion. I rattled the doorknob violently, even though I knew it was unlocked. I wanted them to know I was there. I wanted them to feel the sheer terror of exposure before I even opened the door. "Vanessa, open the door!" I shouted. I threw the door open. The scene that greeted me was a masterpiece of modern art, if the genre was grotesque surrealism. They were not on the bed. In their panic, they had rolled off the mattress and were thrashing on the expensive Persian rug Vanessa had bought last year for $3,000. They were naked, of course, but they were not two separate individuals anymore. They were a singular, writhing entity. Jared was on his back, his face a mask of purple rage and agony. Vanessa was on top of him, but not in a way that suggested passion. Her body was contorted, her hands clawing at the air. Their pelvic regions were fused. The Titan bond had done exactly what the package promised. It had created a bond stronger than the materials it joined. The skin around their connection point was angry red, reacting to the chemical heat of the glue, curing instantly against sensitive flesh. They froze when they saw me. For a split second, the pain was forgotten, replaced by the crushing weight of discovery. "Thomas," Vanessa gasped, her eyes wide with shock. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. "Oh my God!" I screamed, bringing my hands to my face. "What is happening? Who is this?" "Vanessa!" Jared tried to scramble backward instinctively, trying to cover himself or run, but physics was against him. He moved, and Vanessa was dragged with him, eliciting a fresh howl of agony from my wife. "Do not move! You are ripping my skin!" she shrieked, slapping Jared's shoulder. "It is stuck! It is like superglue!" Jared yelled, looking at me with terror. "Mr. Williams, I can explain." "Explain?" I yelled, stepping into the room but keeping a safe distance. "You are naked with my wife. And why are you attached?" I looked at the vanity table. The pink bottle was tipped over a clear, viscous puddle, oozing out onto the wood. "We slipped," Jared stammered, his face sweating profusely. "I fell and we landed, and there was stuff on the floor." It was the single, stupidest sentence I had ever heard in my life. "I am calling 911, I declared, pulling out my phone. "No!" Vanessa screamed. "No police! Thomas, please, just get some water, get some oil. Help us get apart." "I am not a doctor, Vanessa. You look injured. There are chemicals involved. I have to call the professionals." I dialed the number with shaking hands, putting it on speaker so they could hear. 911, what is your emergency?" The operator's calm voice filled the room. "Yes, please, help," I shouted into the phone, injecting a tremor into my voice. "I just came home and found my wife and a guest, and they had an accident. A chemical accident. They are fused together." Fused together, sir?" the operator asked. "Is there a fire?" "No fire. Just adhesion, severe adhesion. They are in a lot of pain. Please send an ambulance and maybe the fire department. I think they are stuck to the floor too." They were not stuck to the floor, but I wanted the full cavalry. "Sir, stay on the line. Help is on the way." I looked down at them. "Hold on, honey. Help is coming." The next 10 minutes were an eternity for them, and a source of deep, dark amusement for me. I paced around the room, wringing my hands, asking unhelpful questions. "How did this happen? Did you read the label? Is that Jared, Lily's husband? Why is Jared stuck to you, Vanessa?" They could not answer. They could only whimper and try to minimize the surface area tension, which was impossible. Then the sirens wailed. Not one siren, multiple. The sound grew louder, piercing the suburban quiet. I ran downstairs to open the front door. A fire truck, an ambulance, and 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of my house. The neighbors were already coming out. Mrs. Higgins from next door was standing on her lawn, holding her phone up, recording everything. The Johnson family across the street had paused their unloading of groceries to gawk. "Up here! Hurry!" I waved the paramedics in. 4 EMTs and 2 police officers stormed into my house, carrying heavy medical bags and a stretcher. I led them up the stairs. "Prepare yourselves," I warned them at the bedroom door. "It is bad." When the professionals walked in, there was a collective pause. I saw the lead paramedic, a burly man named Dave, according to his badge, blink twice. One of the police officers, a young rookie, had to turn away to hide a smirk. "Okay, folks, let us see what we have got here," Dave said, snapping on blue latex gloves. He knelt beside the tangled couple. "Can you tell me what substance was used?" "It was just body oil," Vanessa sobbed. "Oil. It was supposed to be body oil." Dave sniffed the air. Then he leaned in closer to the bond. He touched the hardened, clear residue on Jared's thigh. "This is not oil, ma'am," Dave said dryly. "This smells like cyanoacrylate, industrial adhesive. You two are basically welded." "Get us apart!" Jared yelled. "Cut it!" "We cannot just cut it without taking skin, son," Dave said. "We need to dissolve it." The medics produced a bottle of acetone solvent. They soaked gauze pads and applied them to the junction. Vanessa screamed again. "It stings! Stop it!" "The solvent reacts with raw skin," Dave explained calmly. "And, honestly, with this amount of glue, this is not going to work here. We need to get you to the hospital. We need surgical separation." "Hospital?" Vanessa went pale. "No, I cannot go outside like this." "You have no choice, ma'am." The police officer stepped in, his face stern, but his eyes dancing with amusement. "We need to transport you, but we have a logistical problem." The problem was that they could not walk. They could not fit through the door side by side without crab walking, which caused immense pain. And they certainly could not fit on a standard narrow stretcher together. "We are going to have to improvise," Dave said. They had to cut the expensive Persian rug around them, because Jared's heel had indeed bonded slightly to the fibers during his thrashing. Then they had to cut the bed sheet that they had pulled down with them. "Okay, on the count of 3, we are going to lift you both onto the Mega Mover tarp," Dave instructed. 1, 2, 3. The scream that erupted from both of them as they were hoisted into the air was loud enough to shatter windows. The movement shifted the bond-pulling skin in directions skin was not meant to go. They were carried down the stairs like a piece of awkward furniture, a human knot of misery. I followed close behind, acting the concerned spouse. "Careful! Watch your head," I directed, helpful as ever. When they emerged from the front door, the flashbulbs went off. It seemed the entire neighborhood had convened on my front lawn. Mrs. Higgins was live streaming. I could see the red dot on her screen. "Oh my God, is that Vanessa Williams?" someone shouted. "And is that Jared?" another voice asked. "Isn't that her son-in-law?" Jared tried to hide his face in Vanessa's neck, which only made the intimacy of their position look more compromising. Vanessa closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face, her humiliation absolute. They were loaded into the back of the ambulance. It was a tight squeeze. The medics had to strap them down together on the wide bench, usually reserved for CPR rather than the cot. As the doors were about to close, Vanessa opened her eyes. She looked past the medics, past the police officer, and locked eyes with me. There was no confusion in her eyes anymore. The shock had worn off, replaced by a dawning, horrifying realization. She looked at the house. She looked at me standing there in my pristine dress shirt, unruffled calm. She realized the timing was too perfect. She realized the oil had been tampered with. Her eyes narrowed into slits of pure venom. If looks could kill, I would have dropped dead on the driveway. She knew. She knew I had done this. But she also knew she could say nothing. What would she say? My husband put glue in my lube while I was cheating on him with his son-in-law? That would only cement her guilt. I held her gaze. I did not smile. I simply nodded a slow, imperceptible movement. Yes, the nod said. I know. And I win. Sir, are you coming? The medic asked me. I shook my head, putting on a face of overwhelmed distress. I cannot ride in the back with them like that. It is too traumatic. I need a minute. I need to grab their insurance cards and some clothes for them. I will follow in my car. All right, sir. Meet us at St. Paul General, the medic said, slamming the doors shut. The ambulance peeled away lights, flashing sirens, wailing, carrying my adulterous wife and her lover off to a world of surgical lights and police reports. The police cars followed. The neighbors began to disperse, chattering excitedly, already uploading their videos to social media. I stood alone in the driveway for a moment. The silence returned to the street. I turned and walked back into the house. I closed the front door and locked it. I walked calmly up the stairs to the master bedroom. The room was a wreck. The rug was ruined. The smell of acetone and sweat hung heavy in the air. I walked over to the vanity table. I picked up the empty tube of Titan Bond that I had hidden in my pocket earlier. I also picked up the cap of the lubricant bottle that had rolled under the bed. I went to the bathroom, wrapped the items in toilet paper, and then placed them inside a small Ziploc bag I had brought from the kitchen. I would dispose of this in a public dumpster 3 towns over on my way to the hospital. I looked at the destroyed room one last time. It was messy, yes, but to me, it looked like the first step of a very thorough cleaning. I checked my watch. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. I had plenty of time. I went downstairs, poured my coffee, which was still warm, into a travel mug and walked out the door to go visit my loving wife. The antiseptic smell of St. Paul General Hospital hit me the moment the automatic glass doors slid open. It was a scent I usually associated with cleanliness and healing, but today it smelled like a battlefield. I walked past the reception desk, keeping my head low, avoiding the gaze of the nurses who were undoubtedly whispering about the human knot case that had arrived earlier that afternoon. My footsteps on the linoleum floor echoed with a hollow, rhythmic thud that matched the pounding in my temples. I was not afraid, but I was acutely aware that I was walking into a den of vipers. I found room 304 at the end of the surgical recovery wing. The door was closed, but I could hear the low hum of voices inside. I took a deep breath, adjusted the cuffs of my shirt, and pushed the door open. The room was dim, lit only by the glowing monitors and the harsh strip of light from the hallway. There were 2 beds separated by a thin, partially drawn curtain. Vanessa occupied the bed near the window, and Jared was in the one closer to the door. They were both heavily bandaged. Large white gauze pads covered their thighs and hips, the areas where the Titan Bond had done its most damage during the surgical separation. As soon as I stepped across the threshold, the air in the room changed. It became heavy, charged with a toxic mixture of fear and venom. Vanessa turned her head. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red, But the moment she saw me, her expression shifted from pain to pure, unadulterated hatred. "Get him out!" she shrieked. Her voice was raspy, likely from the hours of screaming she had done earlier. "Get him out of here! He is trying to kill us!" I stopped at the foot of her bed, adopting a look of bewildered concern. "Vanessa, honey, I came to see if you were okay. The doctor said—" "Do not call me honey!" she spat, struggling to sit up before wincing and falling back against the pillows. "You did this, Thomas. You are a sick, twisted psychopath. Look at what you did to us," Jared groaned from his bed. He looked pathetic, his usual arrogance stripped away by morphine and humiliation. "Mr. Williams, man, you have serious problems. You are insane." A tall, stern-looking doctor in a white coat stepped out from the shadows near the window. He held a clipboard and looked at me over the rim of his glasses with deep suspicion. "Mr. Williams?" the doctor asked, his tone icy. "I am Dr. Richardson. Your wife is in a highly agitated state. Her blood pressure is spiking. I think it would be best if you stepped outside." "Doctor, I am her husband," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "I have been worried sick. I just want to know what happened. They were glued together. How is that even possible?" "You know exactly how," Vanessa screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Doctor, listen to me. He has been threatening us. He has been paranoid for months. He thinks everyone is out to get him. He thinks I am cheating on him with the mailman, the gardener, everyone. He is delusional." I blinked, genuinely impressed by her speed. She was not just defending herself, she was building a narrative. She was painting me as the aggressor before I could even open my mouth. "Vanessa, that is not true," I said softly. "I found you two compromised." "Compromised?" Jared scoffed, his voice thick with painkillers. "I was fixing the sink. The master bathroom sink has been leaking for a week. You knew that. You asked me to look at it last Sunday." I stared at him. "I did no such thing." "You did," Jared lied with a conviction that was terrifying. "I came over to fix the pipe. I slipped on the wet floor tiles. I fell backward. Vanessa was in the room changing her clothes, and I knocked her onto the bed. And then we stuck. Because you put glue on the sheets, Thomas. You booby-trapped your own bed because you are a sick, jealous old man." The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. It was so absurd, so full of holes that I almost laughed. But then I looked at Dr. Richardson. He was not looking at the holes in the story. He was looking at the grieving wife and the injured young man. He was looking at me, the stoic, emotionless figure, standing at the foot of the bed. "Is this true, Mr. Williams?" the doctor asked. "Do you have a history of mental instability?" "This is ridiculous," I said, my voice hardening slightly. "There was no leak. And why were you both naked if he just fell?" "I was changing," Vanessa sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I was half-dressed, and his shorts got torn when he fell. It was an accident, a horrible freak accident, and you turned it into a torture chamber." Before I could dismantle this fiction with logic, the door behind me burst open. "Mom! Jared!" It was Lily, my daughter. She looked like she had run all the way from her office. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were swollen shut from crying, and she was still wearing her work blazer. "Lily," I said, turning to her, stepping forward to comfort her. "Honey, listen to me." She didn't even look at me. She sidestepped my embrace as if I were invisible and rushed straight to Jared's bedside. She grabbed his hand, burying her face in his chest. "Oh my God, Jared! Are you okay? The police called me and they said it was chemicals," Lily sobbed. Jared stroked her hair with his uninjured hand, putting on a performance that deserved an Academy Award. "I am okay, baby. I am okay. It hurts a lot, but I am alive. Your dad, he really tried to hurt us this time." Lily froze. She slowly lifted her head and looked at Jared, then at her mother. "What do you mean?" Lily whispered. "Dad did this?" "He trapped us, Lily," Vanessa cried from her bed, her voice trembling with manufactured vulnerability. "Jared came to help fix the plumbing because your father is too useless to do it himself. It was an accident, Lily. Just a clumsy accident." But the bed and the sheets were covered in industrial glue. Who does that? Who puts glue on a bed unless they want to hurt someone? Lily stood up. She turned to face me. The look in her eyes broke something inside my chest that I didn't know was still intact. It was not just anger. It was betrayal. She believed them. She actually believed that her husband, the man who had been draining her bank account for 2 years, was a hero, and I was a villain. "Dad?" Lily's voice shook. "Is that true? Did you put glue on the bed?" "Lily, use your head," I pleaded, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "Does that make sense? I came home and found them together. They were having an affair. The glue was—" "Liar!" Jared shouted, wincing in pain. "Stop lying to her. You have been accusing her of cheating for years. You are obsessed. You are a monster," Lily screamed at me. The sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "Look at them. Look at my husband. He is in agony. How could you? You are sick. Mom always told me you were getting weird, but I did not believe her. I defended you." "Lily, please." I took a step forward. "They are manipulating you. Just look at the facts." "Why was his car hidden behind the shed?" "I parked it there so I could unload the tools," Jared interjected quickly. "And why did the neighbors hear giggling before the screaming?" I pressed. "We were laughing about how bad you are at home maintenance," Vanessa shouted. "Is laughing a crime now, Thomas?" "Get out!" Lily yelled, pushing me. Her hands were small, but the force of her anger made me stumble back. "Get away from them! I do not want to see you! You hurt my husband! You hurt my mom!" I looked at my daughter. She was 24 years old, smart, capable an architect who could design complex structures. Yet emotional manipulation had blinded her completely. She was protecting the very parasites that were feeding on her. "I am the victim here, Lily," I said quietly. "You are not a victim. You are an abuser," Lily sobbed. "Gaslighting us, making us think we are crazy. I am done with you, Dad. I am done." The room fell silent, save for the steady beep of the heart monitors and Lily's jagged breathing. I stood alone in the center of the room, isolated by a wall of lies that was currently stronger than any truth I possessed. The door opened again. This time, it was not a family member. It was a police officer. I recognized him from the scene at the house. Officer Miller. He looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Williams," Miller said, stepping into the room. "Yes," I replied, not taking my eyes off Lily. "I need you to come with me to the station," Miller said, his hand resting instinctively near his belt. "We have taken statements from your wife and Mr. Jared Miller regarding the incident. They are alleging aggravated assault and intentional infliction of bodily harm." "You are arresting me?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "We are detaining you for questioning," Miller corrected. "Given the nature of the trap, the glue, there is probable cause to believe this was premeditated. We need to get your side of the story on the record." I looked at Vanessa. A small, triumphant smile played on her lips, visible only to me. She thought she had won. She thought she had flipped the script. She had humiliated me, turned my daughter against me, and now she was sending me to jail. I looked at Jared. He was watching me with a smug satisfaction, his hand still holding Lily's. And finally, I looked at Lily. She was glaring at me, her arms crossed defensively over her chest, shielding her innocent husband. "Go," Lily said coldly. "Just go." I nodded slowly. I did not fight. I did not scream. I did not beg for them to believe me. That is what a crazy person would do. That is what a guilty person would do. "Very well," I said to the officer. I am happy to cooperate. The truth has a way of coming out, officer. It just takes time." I turned my back on them. As I walked out of the room escorted by the police, I heard Vanessa burst into fresh, theatrical tears, and I heard Lily murmuring soothing words to the man who had been inside her mother 3 hours ago. The injustice of it burned in my stomach like acid. It was a physical pain sharper than any knife. They had taken my dignity. They had taken my family. And now, they were trying to take my freedom. But as I walked down the long white corridor of the hospital, feeling the eyes of the staff on me, a cold resolve settled in my bones. They had played their hand. They had played it well. But they had made one fatal error. They assumed I was just a jealous husband acting on impulse. They assumed this was a crime of passion. They did not know about the files on my cloud drive. They did not know about the forensic accountant I had hired 2 months ago. They did not know that while they were busy fabricating a story about plumbing and accidents, I was playing a game of chess that they didn't even know had started. Let them have this victory. Let them think I am defeated. Let them think I am the villain. I walked out into the cool evening air, the police cruiser waiting for me. I got into the back seat without assistance. The game was far from over. In fact, the real game had just begun. The holding cell at the precinct smelled of industrial bleach and unwashed bodies, a sensory assault that stuck to the back of my throat long after I was released. I had spent exactly 24 hours sitting on a cold metal bench, staring at a concrete wall, while Detective Miller tried and failed to pin a felony assault charge on me. They had nothing. No tube of glue. No receipt. No witness who saw me tamper with the bottle. All they had was the hysterical testimony of 2 people who had been caught in a compromising position and a very amused forensic team who could not prove that the Velvet Touch bottle hadn't been tampered with by a third party or perhaps a manufacturing error. My lawyer, a sharp-tongued man named Marcus, whom I kept on retainer for corporate liability issues, had walked me out of the station with a smirk. However, his smile faded when he handed me the paperwork Vanessa had filed in the interim. It was a temporary restraining order. I was barred from entering my own home, barred from visiting the hospital, and barred from coming within 500 feet of Vanessa or Jared. She had played the fearful victim card perfectly. To the court, I was a volatile husband who had chemically attacked his wife. To the world, I was a pariah. I stood on the sidewalk outside the police station, the drizzle of the Seattle rain soaking my dress shirt. I had no car. It was still impounded. I had no change of clothes. I had only my wallet, my phone, and my laptop bag, which the police had returned to me after a cursory search. I hailed a taxi and directed the driver to the Emerald City Motor Inn, a dilapidated establishment on the outskirts of town that was known more for its hourly rates than its amenities. I needed to be off the grid. I needed a place where no one would look for the CFO of a major tech conglomerate. The room cost $80 a night. It smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap lemon air freshener. The carpet was a suspicious shade of brown, and the neon sign outside flickered with a rhythmic buzzing sound that would have driven a lesser man insane. But I did not care about the aesthetics. I cared about the Wi-Fi connection. I locked the door, drew the heavy curtains, and sat at the small, scarred desk in the corner. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room, illuminating my face. It was time to go to work. Vanessa thought she was clever. She thought that by kicking me out of the house, she had cut me off from information. She forgot who I was. I was a man who managed risk for a living. I was a man who trusted numbers more than people. And because I knew Vanessa had a penchant for overspending on designer handbags and spa treatments, I had installed a comprehensive network monitoring system in our home 3 years ago. It was not for spying on her personal life initially. It was to track the IP addresses of the unauthorized devices she kept buying, and to monitor the bandwidth usage to see if she was streaming 4K movies while claiming she was busy cleaning. But tonight, That system was my lifeline. I engaged the VPN and logged into the back end of our home server. Even though I was not physically there, I was the administrator. I could see everything. I could see that the smart TV in the living room was off. I could see that the thermostat had been turned up to 75 degrees. And most importantly, I could access the cloud backups of every device that had ever connected to our Wi-Fi. Vanessa's iPad was backed up daily at midnight. Jared's phone, which he frequently connected to our network to save his own data plan, was also backed up. I started with Vanessa's email. Getting in was insultingly easy. Her password was Vanessa1980. She had never changed it, despite my constant lectures on cybersecurity. I scrolled past the endless promotional emails from Nordstrom and Sephora. I ignored the spam. I went straight to the trash folder, and then to a subfolder she had archived under the innocuous name Recipes. There were no recipes in there. There were hundreds of emails between her and Jared dating back 6 months. I opened the first one dated from August. The subject line was Project Freedom. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read. "Baby, I cannot stand him anymore," Vanessa had written. "He breathes so loud, he is so boring. I want him gone, but the prenup is ironclad. If I divorce him, I only get the house and a small stipend. We need more." Jared's reply was chilling in its casual cruelty. "We do not need a divorce, Nessie. We need a widow. Or at least a power of attorney. If the old man cracks, if we can prove he is senile or unstable, you get control of the assets. We need to push him. Make him think he is losing it." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The gaslighting, the constant comments about me forgetting things. The way she would move my keys and claim I had lost them. The way she would tell our friends I was getting aggressive when I was perfectly calm. It was all a script. They were trying to manufacture a mental breakdown. I read on. The emails grew darker. They discussed stages. Stage 1 was emotional destabilization. Stage 2 was chemical intervention. "I can get some pills from the gym," Jared wrote in October. "Beta blockers or something to mess with his heart rate. Or maybe mild hallucinogens if he crashes the car or has an episode at work. Novatech will fire him, and the stress will finish him off." They were planning to poison me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The glue was not just a punishment. It was a preemptive strike that had saved my life. If I hadn't come home early that day, if I hadn't snapped, I might be dead in a car accident. A month from now. But the horror did not stop at murder plots. I switched tabs to the financial records. I logged into the county clerk's online portal. I searched for property records under my name. There it was, a second mortgage on our home, taken out 4 months ago. The amount was staggering, $450,000. I stared at the PDF of the loan document. At the bottom was my signature, Thomas Williams. It was a good forgery, but I knew my own hand. The tail of the S was too long. The pressure on the T was too light. They had forged my signature to strip the equity out of our home. But where did the money go? I went back to the cloud backups. I accessed a folder on Jared's phone backup, labeled Wallet. Jared, the personal trainer and entrepreneur, had taken nearly $500,000 of my equity and dumped it into a series of obscure high-risk cryptocurrencies and non-fungible tokens. I saw transaction logs for Moon Rocket Coin, ApeSafe, and something called Elon Mars. I pulled up the current market value of these coins. 0, 0, 0. The $450,000 was gone, evaporated into the digital ether. Jared had gambled away the roof over my head in a desperate bid to become a crypto millionaire, likely promising Vanessa that they would double their money before I ever found out. He was not just a cheat. He was a thief and a failure. But the knife twisted deeper when I found the messages regarding Lily, my sweet, hard-working Lily. She was currently working 2 jobs, one as a junior architect and another doing freelance drafting on weekends, to support Jared. She paid their rent, she paid for his car, she paid for his protein shakes. She believed he was working on a fitness app that would revolutionize the industry. I found a text thread between Jared and a friend named Mike. Mike: "Bro, when are you going to tell your wife you quit the gym?" Jared: "Never. The cash cow needs to keep mooing. Lily is so desperate to please me, it is pathetic. She works 12 hours a day so I can focus on business. She has no idea I am banging her mom. It is the perfect setup. The mom has the capital, the daughter pays the bills. I am living the dream." Mike: "You are cold, man. What if she finds out?" Jared: "She will not. She is not smart enough. She worships me." I close my eyes. A low, guttural growl escaped my throat. It was a sound I did not recognize. I had been angry about the affair. I had been humiliated by the hospital scene. But this was different. This was war. Jared had not just slept with my wife. He had enslaved my daughter. He was using her, mocking her, draining her life force while he plotted to murder her father. And Vanessa, the woman who had carried Lily in her womb, she knew. She knew he was using their daughter, and she didn't care. She was competing with her own child for the attention of a parasite. I stood up and paced the small room. The buzzing of the neon sign seemed to synchronize with the pulsing of my blood. They wanted to paint me as insane? Fine. They wanted to claim I was dangerous. They had no idea. I looked at the documents on the screen, the forged mortgage, the conspiracy to commit murder emails, the evidence of grand larceny. The Titan Bond glue had been a physical inconvenience. It caused them pain, yes. It scarred their skin. But skin heals. Scars fade. Financial ruin, however, that is a cancer that eats you alive. Prison? That is a stain that never washes out. I sat back down. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I was not going to release this information yet. No, that would be too quick. If I went to the police now, they would be arrested, sure. But they might plea bargain. They might get out on bail. I wanted them crushed. I wanted them to feel the walls closing in inch by inch. I wanted them to experience the suffocation of total resource deprivation. I opened a new window. I navigated to the corporate banking portal for Novatech Solutions. Then I navigated to my personal trust management interface. I had been a boring husband for 25 years. I had handled every bill, every tax filing, every investment. Vanessa did not even know the login to our electric bill account, let alone our investment portfolio. She assumed money just appeared in the account because I put it there. I began to type. First, I froze the joint checking account. Second, I contacted the credit card companies and reported the cards as stolen, flagging all future transactions as fraudulent. Third, and most satisfyingly, I drafted an email to the bank that held the fraudulent mortgage. I attached the affidavit of forgery and the police report I was about to file, but I did not hit send on the affidavit yet. I needed to let them feel the squeeze first. I checked the time. It was 3 a.m. In a few hours, the sun would rise over Seattle. Vanessa and Jared would likely be discharged from the hospital, soon assuming their skin grafts were stable. They would go to a hotel, or maybe they would try to go back to my house armed with their restraining order. They would try to buy breakfast. The card would decline. They would try to get an Uber. The account would be locked. They would try to transfer money. Access denied. They were about to discover that without Thomas Williams, the boring old man, they were nothing but 2 broke grifters with a lot of medical bills and a very bleak future. I leaned back in the creaky chair and watched the rain streak against the window. The neon light painted the room in intermittent flashes of red. Project Freedom, I whispered to the empty room. I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would give them freedom. Freedom from my money. Freedom from my protection. Freedom from the illusion of the life they thought they deserved. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small flask of whiskey I had salvaged from my office before the arrest. I took a slow, burning sip. The hunter had become the prey, but the prey had just armed himself with a nuclear warhead. 7 days. That was how long it took for the summons to arrive. For a week, I had been living in the claustrophobic confines of the Emerald City Motor Inn, subsisting on vending machine coffee, and the cold, burning resolve that had settled in my gut. I had not shaved. I had not ironed my shirt. I looked exactly like what they wanted me to be. A broken man dissolved by the acid of his own jealousy and fear. My phone rang at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was Lily. Her name flashed on the screen, a beacon of pain in the dim light of the motel room. I stared at it for a long moment before answering, my thumb hovering over the green button. I hoped foolishly that perhaps she had woken up. Perhaps she had seen a crack in Jared's mask. "Hello, Lily," I answered, my voice raspy from disuse. "Dad." Her voice was not the warm melody I had known for 24 years. It was a shard of ice cold and sharp. "You need to come to the house. Today. 10 o'clock. "Lily, I have a restraining order," I reminded her, keeping my tone weak and defeated. "If I come within 500 feet, your mother will have me arrested." "Mom has agreed to a temporary suspension of the order for 2 hours, Lily said, reciting a script that had clearly been written for her. "Her lawyer is here. We are going to settle this. You come, you sign the divorce papers and the asset division agreement, and Mom will drop the criminal charges for attempted murder. If you do not show up, Officer Miller is coming to the motel to arrest you." "Attempted murder?" I whispered, injecting a tremor of horror into my voice. "Lily, it was just glue. It was a prank." "You burned their skin off, Dad," she snapped, her voice cracking. "Just be there. Do not make this harder than it already is." The line went dead. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, staring at the blank screen. Then I stood up. I did not shower. I did not fix my hair. I put on my wrinkled jacket. I wanted them to see a wreck. I wanted them to see a man who had lost everything. It makes the prey careless when they think the predator is already bleeding out. I took a cab to the house I had paid for, the house where I had raised my daughter. As the taxi pulled up to the curb, I saw the familiar Lexus in the driveway alongside Jared's Mustang, which had seemingly been retrieved from the impound, and a sleek black Mercedes that undoubtedly belonged to the lawyer. I walked up the driveway. My steps were heavy shuffling. I made sure my shoulders were slumped. I reached for the door handle, but it was locked. I had to ring the doorbell of my own home. The door was opened by a stranger. He was a tall man in a charcoal suit that cost more than my first car. He had slicked back hair and a smile that did not reach his predatory eyes. "Mr. Williams," he said, stepping aside. "I am Arthur Sterling, representing your wife. Please come in. Everyone is waiting in the living room." I stepped inside. The house smelled different. It smelled of antiseptic and that cloying floral air freshener Vanessa used to cover up mistakes. I walked into the living room. The layout had been rearranged to resemble a tribunal. Vanessa was sitting in the armchair by the fireplace. She wore a high-necked silk blouse and loose, linen trousers, likely to accommodate the bandages underneath. Her face was a mask of tragic suffering, her makeup done to accentuate the shadows under her eyes. Jared was occupying my favorite leather recliner. He looked ridiculous. He was wearing baggy basketball shorts and a loose t-shirt. His legs were splayed wide, propped up on the ottoman, heavily bandaged from mid-thigh to waist. But despite his injuries, his face was radiant with arrogance. He held a glass of iced tea in one hand and the remote control in the other, looking for all the world like the king of the castle. And there was Lily, my little girl. She was sitting on a hard wooden chair in the corner far away from me. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red, her posture defensive. She refused to look at me as I entered. "Sit down, Thomas," Vanessa said. Her voice was calm, authoritative. She gestured to the small, uncomfortable stool they had placed in the center of the room, facing the three of them. I sat. I let my hands shake visibly. I looked down at the floor, avoiding their eyes. We are here to facilitate a swift and clean end to this unfortunate chapter. Mr. Sterling began opening a leather portfolio and placing a thick stack of documents on the coffee table. My client, Mrs. Williams, is willing to be generous. Despite the horrific physical and psychological trauma you have inflicted upon her and Mr. Jared Miller, she is willing to forego a public criminal trial provided you agree to our terms immediately. What terms? I stammered, wringing my hands together. Sterling cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. First, the dissolution of the marriage on the grounds of irreconcilable differences and spousal abuse. You will admit to the abuse in writing to prevent any future litigation. I nodded, slowly keeping my head down. Okay. Second, Sterling continued, his voice gaining a rhythmic, confident cadence. Asset division. Given the severity of your actions and the long-term medical care my clients will require, you will transfer full ownership of this property to Vanessa Williams. You will vacate the premises immediately. You will also transfer ownership of the vacation condo in Aspen and the rental property in Portland. I made a small, choking sound. But the house my father built, the deck? The house is the least of your worries, old man, Jared interrupted. His voice was smug, dripping with venom. You are lucky we are not sending you to prison for 20 years. Do you know how much skin grafts cost? Do you know how much therapy I need? Jared, please, Lily whispered from the corner, but she did not stand up. Let him speak, Lily, Vanessa said sharply. Jared is a victim here, Sterling continued, ignoring the interruption. Third, spousal support. Given Mrs. Williams's inability to work due to the trauma and the lifestyle she has become accustomed to during your 25 years of marriage, you will pay alimony equivalent to 70% of your gross monthly income from Novatech Solutions and any other revenue streams. This will continue until either death or remarriage. 70%. It was a death sentence. It was slavery. They wanted to turn me into a pack mule, working until I dropped dead to fund their affairs and their crypto gambling habits. 70%, I asked, my voice trembling. How will I live? I have to pay rent, food. That is not our concern, Vanessa said coldly. Maybe you should have thought about that before you swapped my lubricant for industrial glue. Actions have consequences, Thomas. You tried to ruin me. Now I am just ensuring I am protected. And there is one more thing, Jared piped up, shifting uncomfortably in the chair. He looked at me with a grin that was pure evil. Compensation for personal damages. You messed up my leg, Thomas. But worse, you messed up the equipment. He gestured vaguely to his groin area. I am a personal trainer, Jared said, his tone mocking. My body is my livelihood. And frankly, my performance, well, let us just say, the doctors are not sure if everything will work at 100% capacity again. I have lost future earnings. I have lost potential. We are asking for a lump sum payment of $500,000 for Mr. Miller, Sterling added, not even blinking at the absurdity of the request. For pain, suffering, and loss of consortium. Loss of consortium? I repeated, looking up for the first time. He is my son-in-law. He is married to my daughter. He was also my lover, Vanessa said, lifting her chin defiantly. And you took that away from me violently. That is actionable, Thomas. The room fell silent. The shamelessness of it was breathtaking. She was admitting the affair in front of our daughter, in front of a lawyer, and using it as a legal basis to demand money. I looked at Lily. She had buried her face in her hands. She was shaking. Lily, I said softly. She did not look up. Sign the papers, Thomas, Vanessa commanded. She pushed the stack of documents toward me with her foot. Sign them. Pack your bag. And get out. If you sign, we drop the police report. If you do not, Mr. Sterling calls the district attorney right now. They are ready to file charges for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. You will die in prison. I reached out a trembling hand and took the heavy fountain pen from the top of the stack. It was my pen. A Mont Blanc I had bought myself for my promotion 5 years ago. They were even using my own pen to sign my death warrant. I held the pen over the paper. The nib hovered over the signature line. "Do it," Jared urged, leaning forward, his eyes greedy. "Come on, Thomas, be a good boy." "Sign it, Dad," Lily whispered. "Please, just end it." I froze. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the three of them. Vanessa looking at me with the contempt she had hidden for years, now fully exposed. She saw me as a wallet, an obstacle, a fool. Jared, a parasite who had invaded my home, slept with my wife, and was now demanding I pay him for the inconvenience of getting caught. And Lily. My heart broke for her. She was the collateral damage in this war. I lowered the pen, but I did not sign. Instead, I rested my hand on the table. The trembling stopped. "Lily," I said. My voice was different now. The raspy, weak quality was gone. It was steady. It was the voice I used in the boardroom when a deal was about to go south. Lily looked up, startled by the change in tone. "I have a question for you," I said, ignoring Vanessa and Jared. "Just one question." "Thomas, stop stalling," Vanessa snapped. "Quiet," I said. I did not shout, but the command was absolute. It whipped through the room like a lash. Vanessa actually flinched. I locked eyes with my daughter. "Lily, look at me." She met my gaze. Her eyes were swimming with tears and confusion. "Do you truly believe," I asked slowly, enunciating every word, "that I am the villain here? Do you believe that I am a monster who hurts people for no reason? Do you believe in your heart that your mother and Jared are the innocent victims?" Lily looked at Jared. He was making a crazy motion with his finger near his temple, signaling her to ignore me. She looked at her mother, who was glaring at her with intense pressure. "They have the scars, Dad," Lily stammered. "The police said the glue." "I am not asking about the glue," I said. "I am asking about the truth. Do you trust them? Do you trust Jared?" Lily hesitated. I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She thought about the late nights Jared spent working. She thought about the money that went missing. But then the fear took over. The fear of confrontation. The fear of admitting that her entire life was a lie. She hardened her expression. She chose the comfortable lie over the painful truth. "Yes, Lily," said her voice trembling but firm. "I believe them. You are sick, Dad. You need help. You hurt them because you are jealous and mean. Just sign the papers and go away." The words hit me harder than the sight of Vanessa and Jared in bed together. This was the final severance. The last thread connecting me to this family had just been cut. I looked at her for a long moment, etching her face into my memory. The face of the girl I had carried on my shoulders. The face of the girl I had taught to ride a bike. That girl was gone. In her place was a stranger, poisoned by the people sitting on my furniture. "Okay," I said softly. "Okay." "Good," Vanessa exhaled, relaxing back into her chair. "Now sign." I looked down at the paper again. Agreement for total dissolution of assets. I capped the pen. The click was loud in the silent room. I placed the pen gently on the table. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I brushed an invisible speck of dust from my lapel. My posture straightened. The slump was gone. The defeat was gone. "What are you doing?" Sterling asked, his predatory smile faltering. "Mr. Williams, you need to sign." "No," I said calmly. "I do not think I will." "You are making a mistake, Thomas," Vanessa shrieked, her composure cracking. "I will call the police. I will ruin you. You will go to jail." "You can certainly try," I said, looking down at her with a detached curiosity, as if she were a bug under a microscope. "But I would advise against it." "You advise against it?" Jared laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Who do you think you are? You are nothing. You are a washed-up, lonely old man." I turned to Jared. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that has just smelled blood in the water. "I am Thomas Williams," I said, "and you have no idea who you just declared war on." "Get out!" Lily screamed, standing up. "Get out, Dad." "I am going," I said. I picked up the stack of legal documents. "Hey, leave those!" Sterling shouted, reaching for them. "I will need to have my own lawyers review these," I said, pulling them out of his reach. "Standard procedure, Mr. Sterling. Surely you understand." I walked to the door. I did not look back. I could hear Vanessa screaming at her lawyer to call the police immediately. I could hear Jared cursing. I walked out into the fresh air. The sun had come out. The rain had stopped. I walked down the driveway past the Lexus, past the Mustang, past the Mercedes. I reached the street and turned left. I had given them every chance. I had given Lily a chance to choose the truth. She had chosen her side. Now the gloves were off. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I had memorized 2 days ago. "Federal Bureau of Investigation Financial Crimes Division," a voice answered. "Hello," I said, my voice steady and strong. "My name is Thomas Williams. I would like to report a case of multi-million-dollar mortgage fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. I have the documents ready to upload." The game was over. The slaughter was about to begin. I stopped with my hand on the brass doorknob. The cold metal felt grounding against my palm. Behind me, the room was thick with the triumphant silence of 3 people who believed they had just successfully executed a coup. They thought I was fleeing. They thought I was retreating to my motel room to cry over my lost fortune and my broken life. They were wrong. I turned the lock on the front door. Click. The sound was small, yet it echoed through the foyer like a gunshot. I turned around slowly. I did not hunch my shoulders. I did not look down. I unbuttoned my wrinkled jacket, took it off, and tossed it carelessly onto the entryway bench. I rolled up the sleeves of my dress shirt, revealing the heavy Rolex Submariner on my wrist. A watch Vanessa had always claimed was a fake I bought online, but which was in fact worth more than Jared's entire life earnings. I walked back into the living room. My stride was long, purposeful, and predatory. The shuffle of the defeated old man was gone, replaced by the commanding gait of a man who managed billion-dollar mergers before breakfast. "I thought I told you to leave," Vanessa said, her voice wavering slightly as she noticed the change in my demeanor. "Thomas, do not make me call the sheriff," I ignored her. I walked straight to the coffee table, swept their pile of extortionate legal documents onto the floor with a violent backhand sweep of my arm, and placed my leather briefcase in the center of the table. "Sit down," I commanded. My voice was not loud, but it carried a resonance of absolute authority that I had not used in this house for 2 decades. "Excuse me," Arthur Sterling sputtered, standing up. "Mr. Williams, this is highly irregular. If you are not signing, you are trespassing on—" "I said sit down, Arthur," I cut him off, staring him down with a look of cold, hard steel. "Unless you want to be named as a co-conspirator in a federal fraud investigation, you will sit your ass down and listen to what I have to say." Sterling sat. He knew that tone. It was the tone of a man who held all the cards. Jared looked confused. "What is he doing? Why is he talking like that?" I clicked the latches of my briefcase. "You wanted a story, Jared? You wanted a narrative about a jealous, crazy old man. Let me offer you a different genre. Let us call this one The Idiot's Guide to Getting Caught." I reached into the briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of high-resolution photographs. I did not hand them out politely. I tossed them into the air like confetti. They fluttered down onto the table, onto their laps, onto the floor. "What is this?" Lily asked, reaching for a photo that had landed on her shoe. "Look at them," I said. "Look closely." The photos were crystal clear. They were not from the day of the glue incident. They were dated, time-stamped. One photo showed Vanessa and Jared kissing passionately in the elevator of the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Seattle. The date stamp was from 6 months ago. Another showed them dining at a romantic bistro holding hands across the table. A third showed Jared grabbing Vanessa's backside as they walked into a jewelry store, a store where I later found a charge for a diamond bracelet on my supplementary credit card. 6 months, I said, my voice slicing through the silence. You two have been sleeping together for 6 months. This was not a one-time slip-up. This was not a plumbing accident. This was a systematic, long-term affair right under the nose of your wife and my daughter. Vanessa went pale, her hand flying to her mouth. Jared's jaw dropped. This proves nothing, Jared stammered, his face turning a blotchy red. We were just friends hanging out. Friends who check into a hotel room for 3 hours on a Tuesday afternoon? I asked, pointing to a photo of the hotel registry with their signatures. But wait, I said, raising a finger. Pictures can be misinterpreted, right? That is what you will say. So let us try something auditory. I pulled a small, black digital recorder from the bag. I had retrieved it from the hidden camera system in the living room before I left for the motel. I have extensive security in this house, Vanessa, I said, locking eyes with my wife. I installed audio surveillance 2 years ago when I suspected the maid was stealing silverware. I never removed it. I pressed play. The audio quality was pristine. It was from 3 weeks ago. Vanessa's voice filled the room. I feel bad for Lily sometimes. She looks so tired. Jared's voice followed loud and clear. Do not feel bad for her. Lily is an idiot. She is so stupid, Nessie. She believes anything I tell her. I told her I needed $5,000 for a patent filing, and she transferred it within 10 minutes. She is a cash cow. Nothing more, Lily gasped. It was a sharp intake of breath that sounded like she had been punched in the gut. The recording continued. Vanessa. Just be careful. If Thomas finds out, he will cut us off. Jared. The old man, please. He is spineless. I am just waiting for him to die. A heart attack, a stroke, maybe a car crash, who cares? Once he is gone and I have power of attorney over Lily, all that money is ours. We will put Lily in a nice little condo somewhere, and we can travel the world. Vanessa, laughing. You are terrible. I love it. I clicked to stop. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a world shattering. Lily was staring at Jared. Her face had drained of all color. She looked like a ghost. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. She looked at the man she had defended 10 minutes ago, the man she had called a victim. Lily! Jared started, his voice high and panic-stricken. Baby, that is not real. He looked at me, desperation wild in his eyes. That is fake. He made it up. Artificial intelligence. You can clone voices now. He used a computer to fake our voices. Lily, you know I would never say that. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You think I generated a fake conversation 3 weeks ago just in case I needed it today? You give me too much credit, Jared, but if you want to talk about technology, let us look at one more piece of evidence. I pulled out my tablet. I tapped the screen and turned it around to face them. You said you were inside fixing the sink when you fell, I said. You said it was an indoor accident, but my neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, has a very sophisticated security system that covers her backyard, and her camera happens to have a perfect view of our swimming pool. I pressed play on the video. The screen showed our backyard. The timestamp was 1 hour before I arrived home on the day of the incident. The video showed Jared and Vanessa by the pool. They were not fixing plumbing. They were not wearing clothes. They were engaging in acts that were illegal in public view. They were brazen, careless, and disgusting. The video clearly showed them moving from the pool, still entangled, toward the back door of the house. That is public indecency, I said coldly. In broad daylight, in a neighborhood with children. The video played on. It showed them entering the house. It showed no tools. It showed no plumbing equipment. It showed only lust. Lily made a sound. It was a low, keening noise like a wounded animal. Suddenly, she moved. She launched herself out of the chair. She did not go for me. She went for Jared. "You bastard!" she screamed. She collided with him in the recliner. Her hand connected with his face with a resounding slap that echoed off the walls. Then she hit him again. And again. She was clawing at him, screaming in a voice raw with betrayal. "You called me stupid! You used me! I worked for you! I loved you!" "Ow! My leg! Get off me!" Jared shrieked, trying to push her away, but his bandaged legs made him immobile. "Vanessa! Help!" Vanessa scrambled up from her chair, forgetting her own injuries. "Lily, stop! You are hurting him!" Vanessa grabbed Lily's shoulders and tried to pull her off. "Stop it! He is injured!" Lily spun around and shoved her mother. It was a hard shove, fueled by a lifetime of repressed anger, and the sudden realization of this ultimate betrayal. Vanessa stumbled back, tripping over the pile of photos on the floor. She landed hard on her bandaged hip and let out a yelp of pain. "Do not touch me!" Lily screamed, tears streaming down her face. "You are disgusting! You are my mother! How could you? How could you sleep with my husband?" Arthur Sterling, the high-priced lawyer, had seen enough. He snapped his briefcase shut and stood up looking for the nearest exit. "I think my presence is no longer required," Sterling muttered, edging toward the door. "I cannot represent clients who lie to me about the fundamental facts of the case." "Sit down, Arthur," I barked. "I am not done." Sterling froze. He looked at me, then at the chaos on the floor, and slowly sank back onto the edge of the sofa. "The part you need to hear is coming up," I said to the lawyer, my voice calm amidst the screaming of my family. I looked at Vanessa, who was weeping on the floor, and Jared, who was clutching his face where Lily had scratched him. "You threatened to sue me for assault," I said, my voice cutting through their noise. "You claimed I trapped you. You claimed intentional infliction of harm." I picked up the photos of the pool incident again. "But here is the legal reality, Mr. Sterling," I said, turning to the lawyer. "Jared Miller is not a resident of this house. His name is not on the deed. His name is not on the lease. He does not pay bills here. On the day in question, I did not invite him in. My daughter was not home to invite him in." I pointed a finger at Vanessa. "And while my wife lives here, she does not have the unilateral right to authorize a non-resident to use this property for the commission of a crime. And make no mistake, public indecency and adultery, which is still grounds for fault in this state, are violations of the marital contract and local ordinances." I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Therefore, Jared was trespassing. He was an intruder engaged in illicit acts. Under the Castle Doctrine and the defense of property laws, I have no duty of care to ensure the safety of an intruder who is defiling my home. If an intruder slips on a substance I used for home repair, a substance I own in a house I own, that is not assault. That is an unfortunate workplace accident for a trespasser." I looked at Jared, who was pale and trembling. "You have no case," I said. "The lawsuit is dead. The victim narrative is dead. And if you try to pursue it, I will release this video to the news, to the police, and to every one of your clients at the gym. I will have you registered as a sex offender for public indecency near a school zone." I turned to Vanessa. "And you," I said, "you wanted 70%. You wanted the house?" I laughed again. "You are going to wish you had settled for a one-way ticket out of town." Lily was standing in the middle of the room, her chest heaving, looking from the photos to the tablet to me. The realization was washing over her. The horror of what she had done, how she had treated me, was sinking in. "Dad," she whispered, her voice broken. I did not look at her. Not yet. I was not done with the butchers. I had to finish skinning the wolves before I could tend to the lamb. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "do we have an understanding? Or do I need to call the district attorney and show him the rest of the evidence regarding the mortgage fraud? Sterling's eyes widened behind his glasses. Mortgage fraud? Oh, we have not even gotten to the financial crimes yet, I said, smiling grimly. That is part 2. The silence in the living room was no longer the silence of shock. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a courtroom before the gavel falls on a death sentence. The photographs of the affair lay scattered on the floor, like fallen leaves, and the echo of the incriminating audio recording still seemed to vibrate in the air. Lily was sobbing quietly in the corner, her face buried in her hands, her world completely dismantled. Jared was clutching his face, blood seeping between his fingers from where Lily had scratched him. But Vanessa was not done. She wiped the tears from her face, her survival instinct kicking in with a desperate feral intensity. She looked at the photos, then at me, and finally, she let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. It was a brittle sound, like glass breaking. Fine, Vanessa spat, struggling to stand up despite her injuries. She held onto the armrest of the chair for support. Fine, Thomas. You proved it. We had an affair. You have pictures. You have recordings. Congratulations, you are not as stupid as you look. But do not think this changes the bottom line. She pointed a shaking finger at the walls around us. This is still a community property state. We have been married for 25 years. I do not care what evidence you have of adultery. The law says half of everything is mine. You cannot kick me out of my own house. I am on the deed. I am entitled to equitable distribution, so you can take your little spy show and choke on it because I am not leaving until I get my share. Arthur Sterling, her lawyer, seemed to regain a fraction of his confidence at this. He adjusted his tie, clearing his throat. Mrs. Williams is correct partially. While the adultery may affect alimony calculations, the division of marital assets specifically, the primary residence remains subject to state laws regarding joint ownership. You cannot simply evict a spouse from the marital home, Mr. Williams. I looked at Sterling, then at Vanessa. I felt a wave of genuine pity for them, not for their suffering, but for their profound ignorance. They were playing checkers while I had been playing three-dimensional chess for a quarter of a century. Arthur, I said, my voice dropping to a conversational, almost professorial tone. I assume you did a standard asset search on me before you took this case? You saw my W-2 forms? My tax returns? We did, Sterling replied warily. You are the chief financial officer of Novatech Solutions. You earn a base salary of $150,000 a year. Respectable, but hardly enough to maintain this estate and your other properties, without significant debt, which we assumed you were hiding. $150,000, I repeated slowly. Yes, that is the salary I draw. That is the salary Vanessa has complained about for 2 decades. She always asked why a CFO made so little, why I was so cheap, why we did not live like the other executives. I walked over to the window looking out at the manicured lawn. I lied to you, Vanessa. Well, technically, I omitted the truth. You see, Novatech Solutions is not just a company I work for. In 1998, 2 years before I met you, my college roommate and I wrote the source code for the virtualization engine that Novatech is built on. He was the face. I was the money and the operations. I turned back to face them. The room was dead silent. I am not an employee, Arthur, I said cold. I am the silent co-founder. I own 35% of the outstanding shares of Novatech Solutions. My annual income is not $150,000. That is just a stipend I pay myself to keep up appearances. My actual income comes from quarterly dividends. Jared lowered his hands from his face. His eyes were wide, calculating the numbers. Wait, Novatech? That company is worth billions. Last valuation was $4.2 billion, I corrected him. My dividends last year totaled roughly $12 million. Vanessa gasped. Her knees gave way and she sank back onto the arm of the chair. $12 million. You have $12 million. And you made me clip coupons? You made me drive a 3-year-old Lexus. I wanted to see if you loved me or the lifestyle, I said simply. I got my answer very early on, but I stayed for Lily. However, that is not the legal point I am making. I walked back to the briefcase and pulled out a blue binder. It was thick, bound in leather, and embossed with gold letters. The Lily Future Irrevocable Trust. Before we got married, Vanessa, I knew the risks of my industry. I knew that lawsuits and liability were part of the game, so I protected my assets. I established an irrevocable trust. Every single share of stock, every dividend check, and every bonus I have earned since 1999 goes directly into this trust. I tossed the binder onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud that sounded like a coffin lid closing. State law is very clear on this, Arthur, I said to the lawyer, whose face had gone ashen. Assets held in a premarital irrevocable trust are not marital property. They are separate entities. They are untouchable in a divorce proceeding. Vanessa does not own half of my fortune. She owns half of the checking account, which currently has about $4,000 in it. No, Vanessa whispered. That is not possible. We bought the house 5 years after we got married. We did not buy the house, I corrected her. The trust bought the house. Look at the deed, Vanessa. Did you ever actually read the paperwork you signed at the closing? Or were you too busy complaining about the paint color? I watched the realization hit her. She scrambled for the papers Sterling had brought. She tore through them until she found the copy of the property title. Owner of record, I recited from memory. LFT Holdings, LLC. LFT? Vanessa stammered. Lily Future Trust Holdings, I translated. This house belongs to a limited liability company owned entirely by the trust. You and I are not owners, Vanessa. We are tenants. We have a lease agreement with LFT Holdings. I pay rent to my own trust every month. That is why I can evict you. You are a tenant who has violated the lease by engaging in criminal activity on the premises. Vanessa dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor. She looked sick. She looked like a woman who had been running a marathon only to realize she was running in the wrong direction the entire time. But I was not done. I turned my gaze to the sofa where Jared was sitting. And this brings us to the most interesting part of the morning, I said, my voice hardening into steel. The mortgage. Jared flinched. He tried to shrink back into the leather cushions. When I hacked into your cloud, Jared, I found the loan documents, I said. You and Vanessa took out a second mortgage on this property for $450,000. You forged my signature. You thought you were clever. You thought that since the house was worth $2 million, no one would notice a $500,000 lien. We were going to pay it back, Jared blurted out, sweat pouring down his face. It was an investment. Crypto is going to bounce back. Here is the problem with your plan, I said, ignoring his pathetic excuse. You cannot mortgage a house you do not own. I stepped closer to them. Since the house is owned by LFT Holdings, LLC, and not by Thomas and Vanessa Williams, your forgery is not just a simple case of spousal fraud. It is much, much worse. You attempted to pledge corporate collateral for a personal loan without corporate authorization. You defrauded the bank by misrepresenting ownership. I looked at Arthur Sterling. Mr. Sterling, you know what that is called, do you not? Sterling closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. He whispered one word. Federal bank fraud. Correct, I said cheerfully. And because the loan amount exceeds $100,000 and because it involved interstate wire transfers to your crypto exchange, it falls under the jurisdiction of the FBI. Jared let out a strangled noise. FBI? I made a phone call this morning at 8:30, I said, checking my Rolex. I spoke with Special Agent Henderson at the Seattle field office. I sent him the forged documents. I sent him the title deed proving we do not own the house. I sent him the transaction log showing the money going into your wallet, Jared." "No," Jared moaned. He tried to stand up, but his legs failed him. He slid off the chair and collapsed onto the rug, the same rug he had defiled weeks ago. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the snot running from his nose. "Thomas, please, please do not do this. I am 26. I cannot go to prison. They will kill me in there." "You should have thought about that before you stole my money to buy digital pictures of monkeys," I said coldly. I turned to Vanessa. She was staring at me with a look of absolute horror. It was not just fear anymore. It was the crushing weight of total annihilation. "You," I said to her, "you are a co-signer on the loan. You are a co-conspirator. You knowingly participated in the fraud. The bank will not just come after the money, Vanessa. They will press charges. Mandatory minimum sentences for bank fraud of this magnitude start at 5 years. And since you have no assets, because the trust owns everything, you cannot even afford a defense attorney like Mr. Sterling here." I looked at Sterling. "I assume you work on a retainer, Arthur." "I doubt my wife can pay your next invoice." Sterling stood up abruptly. He grabbed his briefcase. He looked at Vanessa with a mixture of disgust and professional distance. "Mrs. Williams, given the revelation of these federal crimes, I must withdraw as your counsel immediately to avoid any conflict of interest. I advise you to seek a public defender." "Arthur, you cannot leave me!" Vanessa screamed, reaching for him. "Do not touch me!" Sterling snapped, pulling his arm away. He looked at me, gave a curt nod of respect, the respect of one predator acknowledging another, and walked out the front door without looking back. The room felt empty without him. It was just the family now, the broken, twisted wreckage of a family. Jared was sobbing on the floor, curling into a fetal position. Vanessa was sitting on the floor, staring blankly at the wall, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She had lost her husband. She had lost her lover. She had lost her daughter. She had lost the fortune she thought was hers. And now she was about to lose her freedom. I walked over to the fireplace. I looked at the family portrait hanging above the mantel. It was taken 10 years ago. We looked so happy. It was a lie then, and it was a lie now. I reached up, took the painting down, and dropped it into the unlit fireplace. "I am a generous man," I said, turning back to them. "I could have the police here in 5 minutes. But I will give you a head start." I looked at my watch. "You have 30 minutes, I said. 30 minutes to pack your personal effects. Clothes, toiletries, that is it. No jewelry, no electronics that were purchased with my money, no furniture." 30 minutes, Vanessa whispered. "Thomas, where will we go?" "I do not know," I said. "And frankly, my dear, I do not give a damn." I looked at Jared. "And you. If you are still on my property in 31 minutes, I will shoot you for trespassing. And unlike your little lawsuit, I will win that case."
"Lily!"
Vanessa cried out, looking to the corner.
"Lily, help me! Talk to him!"
Lily stood up. Her face was swollen, her eyes red, but her expression was unreadable. She walked slowly toward the center of the room. She passed Jared, who reached out a hand to grab her ankle. She stepped over him, as if he were a pile of dirty laundry. She passed Vanessa, who reached out to hug her. Lily sidestepped her mother, avoiding her touch with a look of physical revulsion. She walked straight to me. She stood there, looking up at my face. I searched her eyes for anger, for hatred. But all I saw was a deep, profound sorrow. "I am sorry, Dad," she whispered. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to tell her it was going to be okay. But I couldn't. Not yet. She needed to see this through. She needed to see the consequences of blindness. "Go upstairs and pack your things, Lily," I said softly. "You are not going with them. But you cannot stay here tonight. I will get you a hotel."
"No,"
Lily said, her voice shaking. "I need to go. I cannot be here. She turned and ran up the stairs. I looked back at the two people on the floor. 28 minutes, I said. Tick-tock. Jared scrambled up, wincing in pain, and limped toward the door, not even bothering to look at Vanessa. He was running. Rats always run first. Vanessa sat there for a moment longer. She looked at me one last time. "I loved you once, Thomas," she said. "No, Vanessa," I replied, my voice devoid of any emotion. "You loved the safety I provided, and you just blew up the shelter." She stood up, broken and defeated, and dragged herself up the stairs. I stood alone in the living room of my multi-million-dollar home, listening to the frantic sounds of packing from the floor above. I felt no joy. I felt no triumph. I felt only the cold, hard satisfaction of a balance sheet that had finally been corrected. The debt was paid. The assets were liquidated. Now all that was left was to watch them burn. The 30 minutes I had allotted them were ticking away, each second marked by the rhythmic, indifferent movement of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I stood by the window, watching the rain begin to fall again, turning the driveway into a slick gray ribbon. It was fitting weather for an eviction. Upstairs, I could hear the chaotic sounds of drawers being ripped open and suitcases being zipped with frantic haste. They were scrambling like rats on a sinking ship, desperate to salvage whatever scraps of luxury they could carry before the water swallowed them whole. But the water was already rising faster than they realized. I had told them I would give them a head start before calling the police. That was a lie. I had already called the authorities the moment I hung up with the FBI agent earlier that morning. I simply wanted them to feel the terror of the countdown, to experience the false hope that they might escape, only to have it snatched away at the finish line. At 28 minutes past the hour, 2 unmarked black sedans and a standard patrol cruiser turned the corner. They did not use sirens. They moved with the silent, predatory grace of sharks. They pulled up to the curb, blocking the driveway completely. Jared came thundering down the stairs first, dragging a large duffel bag that looked stuffed to bursting. He was limping heavily, his face a mask of sweat and panic. He did not even look at me. He was focused solely on the front door, on the freedom he thought was waiting on the other side. He threw the door open and froze. Standing on the porch were 4 officers. 2 were uniformed local police. The other 2 wore windbreakers with FBI emblazoned in yellow letters on the back. "Jared Miller?" one of the federal agents asked. It was not a question. It was a confirmation of a target acquired. Jared dropped the bag. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. He stumbled back, his hands shaking violently. No, I was just leaving. I am leaving right now." "You are not going anywhere, son," the agent said, stepping into the foyer. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity theft. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." "Thomas!" Jared screamed, spinning around to face me. "Thomas, tell them! Tell them it was a mistake! I will pay you back, I swear!" I stood in the entrance of the living room, leaning against the doorframe with my arms crossed. I looked at him with the same dispassionate interest one might show a bug being crushed under a boot. "You cannot pay me back, Jared," I said calmly. You have no money. And even if you did, the federal government does not accept 'I swear' as legal tender." The officers moved in. They grabbed Jared's arms. He howled in pain as they wrenched his shoulders back. The movement pulled at the fresh skin grafts on his hips and thighs, the souvenir from my little tube of Titan Bond. "Ow! Watch the legs! My legs are burned!" he shrieked, tears streaming down his face. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited, ignoring his complaints as the handcuffs clicked shut with a sound of finality. At that moment, Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs. She was struggling with a Louis Vuitton suitcase that was clearly too heavy for her. She stopped dead when she saw the scene below. She saw her lover, the man she had destroyed our family, for being manhandled by federal agents. She did not run to help him. She did not scream his name. She dropped the suitcase. It tumbled down the stairs, banging loudly against every step, until it landed at Jared's feet, bursting open and spilling her silk lingerie all over the foyer floor. Vanessa ran down the stairs, but she did not run to Jared. She ran to me. She threw herself at my feet. She actually fell to her knees, grabbing my trousers with both hands. Her face was a ruin of mascara and terror.
Thomas! Thomas, please, she wailed. Stop them. Send them away. He is just a boy. He made a mistake. We all made mistakes.
I looked down at her. This woman who had sneered at me for 25 years, who had called me boring, who had plotted to have me committed to a mental institution so she could steal my fortune, was now begging for my protection. It was pathetic. It was disgusting.
Let go of me,
I said. My voice was ice.
No, I will not let go,
she sobbed, tightening her grip.
Thomas, think about us. 25 years. We have a history. We have a child.
You cannot let him go to prison. If he goes, they will come for me too. You have to fix this. You always fix everything.
Fix it?
I laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. You want me to fix the fact that you forged my signature to steal $500,000? You want me to fix the fact that you slept with our son-in-law in my bed? There is no glue strong enough to fix this, Vanessa.
I am your wife,
she screamed, her voice cracking.
Doesn't that mean anything to you? The vows. For better or for worse?
I reached down and peeled her fingers off my leg one by one. I did it with force. I did not care if I hurt her. The vows? I asked, stepping back to avoid her touch. You broke those vows a long time ago. And as for our history, that history died the exact moment you climbed on top of our son-in-law. You killed it. You killed us. Do not talk to me about 25 years of marriage when you were willing to throw it all away for 20 minutes of cheap thrill with a grifter.
Ma'am, step away from Mr.
Williams. One of the officers warned, his hand resting near his taser. Vanessa slumped onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. She looked at Jared, who was now being dragged out the door. He was looking at her, pleading with his eyes, but she could do nothing. She was powerless. For the first time in her adult life, she had no leverage. Then I saw Lily. She was standing halfway down the stairs. She had witnessed everything. She had seen her husband arrested. She had seen her mother begging on her knees. She looked like a sleepwalker, pale and hollow. She was holding a small overnight bag. "Lily," I said, my voice softening. She looked at me. Her eyes were dead. There was no light in them, just a vast, consuming darkness.
"I am going," she whispered. "I am leaving." "Where are you going?" I asked. "I do not know," she said. "Just away." I walked to the foot of the stairs. I looked up at my daughter. This was the most critical moment of my life. I had destroyed her world to save her from a lie, but now I had to ensure she did not drown in the wreckage. "You have a choice, Lily," I said. "A very real choice." I pointed to the door where the police were hauling Jared into the back of the cruiser. Then I pointed to Vanessa, who was curled up on the floor weeping. "You can go with them," I said. "You can follow your mother into poverty and legal battles. You can stand by your husband while he rots in a federal prison. You can continue to be the victim of their lies." I paused. "Or you can stay. You can stay with me. We can start over. I will help you. I will pay for your school. I will help you build your own career, not one that supports a leech. But there is a condition." Lily looked at me, a flicker of life returning to her eyes. "What condition?" "You must cut them off," I said firmly. "Completely. No phone calls, no visits, no money, and you must agree to intense therapy. You are broken, Lily. We both are. But I have the resources to fix us if you are willing to do the work. If you choose them, you walk out that door and I never want to see you again. If you choose me, you stay and we heal." Lily looked at Jared through the open door.
He was pressing his face against the window of the police car, mouthing her name. She looked at Vanessa, who reached a hand out to her. "Lily, baby, do not leave me alone with him. He is cruel." Lily looked at her mother, and for the first time, she saw Vanessa not as the glamorous, strong matriarch, but as a selfish, desperate woman who had betrayed her own flesh and blood. Lily took a deep breath. She walked down the remaining stairs. She walked past Vanessa without even a glance. She walked out onto the porch. The rain was coming down harder now. She walked straight to the police car. The officer was just about to close the back door. "Wait," Lily said. The officer paused. Jared looked up, hope flaring in his eyes. "Lily, baby, tell them, get me a lawyer." Lily reached into her pocket. She pulled out her wedding ring. It was a modest diamond one that I had paid for because Jared claimed he was saving up for a house. She looked at the ring. Then she looked at Jared. "You are not a victim," Lily said, her voice shaking, but audible over the rain. "You are a monster, and I hope you rot." She threw the ring. It hit Jared square in the forehead, bouncing off and landing in the muddy gutter. "Lily!" Jared screamed as the officer slammed the door shut. Lily turned around. She walked back up the steps. She walked past me and stood in the hallway, dripping wet. "I choose you, Dad," she whispered. I nodded. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "Go to the kitchen. Make yourself some tea. We have work to do." I turned my attention back to Vanessa. She was the last piece of trash that needed to be taken out. "Get up," I said. Vanessa rose slowly. She looked old. The stress of the last few weeks had aged her 10 years. "Thomas, where will I go? I have no money. You froze the accounts." "That is correct," I said. "You have $30 in your purse. That should get you a bus ticket to your sister's house in Idaho. I hear she needs a babysitter." "Idaho," Vanessa gasped. "I hate Idaho, and my sister hates me." "Then I suggest you start walking," I said. "Because you are trespassing on corporate property." She glared at me, a flash of her old arrogance returning. "I will take the car. The Mercedes is mine." "Wrong again," I said, holding up a set of keys I had swiped from the bowl earlier. "The Mercedes is leased by Novatech Solutions for executive use. You are not an executive. You are an unemployed housewife with a pending criminal record. You are not taking the car." "You cannot do this!" she shrieked. "How am I supposed to leave?" "You have legs," I said. "Use them. Before I ask the officers to remove you as well." Vanessa looked at the officers who were still standing by their cars, watching the drama unfold. She realized I was not bluffing. She grabbed her handbag. She did not try to pick up the suitcase that had spilled. She grabbed a coat from the rack, a coat I had bought her for Christmas, and wrapped it around herself. She walked to the door. She stopped and looked back at me. "You will regret this," she hissed. "You will be lonely, Thomas. You will die alone in this big empty house." "I would rather die alone," I replied, "than live with a snake." I slammed the door in her face. I locked it. Then I engaged the deadbolt. I watched through the peephole as she walked down the driveway in the pouring rain, her high heels clicking on the pavement, a solitary figure disappearing into the gray mist. She had no umbrella. She had no car. She had no husband. She had no dignity. The fallout in the weeks that followed was swift and brutal. The local news picked up the story immediately. The Glue Mom became a viral headline. The mugshots of Jared and Vanessa, taken after she was eventually charged as an accomplice, were plastered all over the internet. Vanessa lost her job as a regional manager at the insurance firm within 48 hours. The morality clause in her contract was ironclad, and being involved in federal fraud and a public sex scandal involving her son-in-law was more than enough grounds for termination. She was unhireable. Her reputation in Seattle was incinerated. Jared was denied bail due to being a flight risk and the sheer volume of the fraud. He was sitting in a county jail cell, waiting for a federal trial that would likely put him away for at least 8 years. And then, there were the scars. The doctors said the titan bond had reacted chemically with the epidermis. The removal process had required skin grafts taken from their own bodies. Vanessa had thick, ropey scars on her inner thighs and abdomen. Jared had them on his groin and legs. I heard through the grapevine, my lawyer kept tabs on them, that the scar tissue did not heal cleanly. It was tight. It pulled. And when the weather turned cold, which it often did in Seattle, the scars ached with a deep, burning throb. It was a permanent, physical reminder of their betrayal. Every time it rained, they would feel the pain of their infidelity. They would literally carry the mark of their sin for the rest of their lives. I stood by the window in my study, watching the police cruiser carrying Jared disappear around the bend. The house was quiet. The silence was absolute. For the first time in 25 years, I did not have to worry about pleasing a woman who despised me. I did not have to worry about a son-in-law who mocked me. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not happiness. Happiness was too light, too bubbly for what I was feeling. This was something heavier, darker, but infinitely more satisfying. It was relief. It was the feeling of setting down a heavy load after walking 1,000 miles. I was empty. The rage had burned itself out. The love had evaporated. But in that emptiness, there was peace. I turned away from the window. Lily was in the kitchen. I could hear the kettle whistling. I walked toward the sound. I had a daughter to save. And for the first time in a long time, I was the only man in the house who held the keys. Time has a peculiar way of reshaping reality. When you are in the eye of the storm, the chaos feels infinite, as if the rain will never stop, and the winds will never die down. But then the clouds break. The debris is cleared and you find yourself standing in a landscape that is unrecognizable, yet somehow perfectly fitted to the person you were always meant to be. It has been 2 years since the ambulances, the federal agents, and the screaming matches in the foyer of my suburban colonial home. That house is gone now. I sold it 3 months after the arrests. I did not want the money. I wanted the exorcism. I sold it to a young family from California who knew nothing of the history, nothing of the adhesive trauma in the master bedroom or the betrayals whispered in the kitchen. I sold it fully furnished, leaving behind every stick of furniture, every rug, and every curtain that Vanessa had picked out. I walked out with my clothes, my books, and my freedom. I moved to the city. Specifically, I bought the penthouse on the 42nd floor of the Rainier Tower in downtown Seattle. It is a space of glass and steel, bathed in natural light, with a view that stretches across the Puget Sound to the Olympic Mountains. It is sharp, modern, and masculine, a stark contrast to the frilly, overdecorated mausoleum I had lived in for 2 decades. Here, the only noise is the hum of the city far below, and the jazz records I play on my vintage turntable. There is no nagging. There is no performative poverty. I finally stopped hiding my wealth. I drive an Aston Martin now, not because I need to impress anyone, but because I enjoy the engineering. I wear tailored Italian suits because they fit better. I live as the silent co-founder of a billion-dollar company should live, with unapologetic comfort. But the most significant renovation project of the last 2 years has not been my real estate. It has been my daughter. Lily is a survivor. The first 6 months were a nightmare of withdrawals, not from drugs, but from the toxic dependency she had on Jared. She had to unlearn the programming he had installed in her mind. There were nights she would call me at 3 a.m. weeping, asking if she was unlovable, asking if she was truly as stupid as they had said. I would drive over to her apartment, sit with her, and just listen. We did not use glue to fix her. We used patience. She finalized the divorce 6 months ago. It was a default judgment since Jared is currently a guest of the federal government and could not afford a lawyer to contest it. With the ring gone and the name changed back to Williams, Lily began to find her footing. She quit her job at the architectural firm, realizing that her passion for design had been hijacked by Jared's demands for a dream house. Instead, she surprised me. She enrolled in the MBA program at the University of Washington. She started asking me questions about Novatech, about virtualization engines, about market caps, and fiscal responsibilities. We spent hours at my dining table poring over spreadsheets. I saw a spark in her that I had not seen since she was a child. She has my mind for systems, my eye for details. She is preparing to step into the family business not as a nepotism hire, but as a woman who understands the weight of the legacy she will inherit. To bridge the chasm that had grown between us during her marriage, we started a tradition. Once a month we pack bags and just drive. No itinerary, no business calls. We have driven the Pacific Coast Highway, camped in the Redwoods, and hiked in Montana. On a cliff overlooking the ocean in Oregon, Lily finally broke the last wall of silence. "I hated you for a while," she admitted, looking out at the gray waves. "When you played those tapes, I hated you for being right. It hurt more than the lie." "I know," I said, putting a hand on her shoulder. "The truth is a blade, Lily. It cuts before it heals." "Thank you," she said, leaning her head against me. "Thank you for cutting me loose. That moment was worth more than every dividend check I have ever cashed. My own heart has also found a rhythm I did not think possible. I am no longer the boring bank account. I am Thomas, and I am seeing someone. Her name is Elena. She is 50 years old, a corporate litigator who eats sharks like Arthur Sterling for breakfast. We met at a charity gala for digital literacy. She did not know who I was, and she did not care. She was arguing passionately about data privacy laws, and I was captivated by her intellect. Elena has her own money. She has her own penthouse. She has her own life. She does not need me to buy her purses or validate her existence. When we are together, it is a meeting of equals. We cook together. We debate politics. We travel. For the first time in my life, I am with a woman who looks at me and sees a partner, not a utility provider. She knows about Vanessa. She knows about the glue. Her reaction when I told her was not horror, but a dry, impressed chuckle. "Industrial adhesive," she had mused, sipping her wine. "Creative. Cruel, but creative. Remind me never to cross you, Thomas." "You never have to worry about that," I replied, and I meant it. My experience with the legal system and the emotional wreckage of my marriage led me to a new venture. I realized that during that entire ordeal, the police, the doctors, and even my own family initially viewed me as the aggressor simply because I was a man. The smirk on the young officer's face when he saw Jared and Vanessa stuck together haunted me. He thought it was funny. He did not see the betrayal. He saw a comedy sketch. So I established the Silent Strength Foundation. It is a non-profit organization dedicated to providing legal aid, psychological counseling, and emergency housing for male victims of domestic abuse and psychological manipulation. It is an underfunded, stigmatized corner of social work. Men are taught to be stoic, to absorb pain, to never complain. I want to give them a voice. I poured $5 million into the seed fund. We have already helped 300 men extract themselves from abusive, coercive financial and emotional relationships. Every time we win a case, I feel a little bit more of the old bitterness chip away. But the universe, in its infinite sense of irony, decided to give me one final scene to close the chapter on Vanessa. It happened last Tuesday. I was not at my usual gourmet grocer. I had stopped at a budget supermarket chain on the outskirts of the city to pick up supplies for a food drive my foundation was organizing. I was standing in the checkout line, distracted by my phone, checking the stock market in Tokyo. "Paper or plastic?" The voice was raspy, familiar, yet degraded. It sounded like a recording played on a warped cassette tape. I looked up. Standing behind the register, wearing a faded red smock that was too large for her, was Vanessa. She looked 20 years older. Her hair, once dyed a vibrant, expensive blonde, was now a dull gray pulled back in a messy bun. Her face was lined with deep creases of stress and exhaustion. Her hands, those hands that used to refuse to touch a dish sponge, were chapped and rough, scanning cans of beans and boxes of cheap cereal with a mechanical lethargy. She froze when she saw me. She looked at my suit. She looked at the expensive watch on my wrist. She looked at the calm, healthy glow of my skin. Then she looked down at herself. She saw the red smock. She saw the name tag that read, Vanessa, trainee. The silence stretched between us longer than 25 years. The scanner beeped incessantly, demanding attention, but she could not move. Her eyes filled with a sudden terrified moisture. She was waiting for me to speak. She was waiting for me to mock her, to laugh, to make a scene, to demand she call a manager so I could get her fired. She was waiting for the monster she had convinced herself I was. But I had no monsters left in me. I looked at her. I saw the apartment she likely lived in. Cramped, smelling of damp, lonely. I saw the bus ride she took to work. I saw the emptiness of her days. She had wanted freedom. She had wanted to be rid of the boring husband. She had gotten exactly what she wished for. I did not smile. I did not frown. I simply nodded. A single polite acknowledgement of her existence. "Hello, Vanessa," I said softly. She flinched as if I had struck her. She could not meet my eyes. She lowered her head, shame radiating off her in waves. "Paper," I said to the bagging clerk. I paid for the supplies. I picked up the bags. I walked away. I did not look back. I did not feel the need to verify her misery. It was written in every line of her posture. As for Jared, my contacts in the federal system tell me his charm did not survive the intake process. Federal prison is not a place for pretty boys who steal from their families. He is currently housed in a low-security facility, but low security does not mean safe. He is ostracized. The other inmates know what he did. There is a code, even among criminals, and stealing your father-in-law's retirement and sleeping with his wife is considered low. He spends his days working in the laundry detail for 12 cents an hour, bullied, isolated, and terrified. The investment genius is now folding sheets that are not made of Egyptian cotton. I stood on the balcony of my penthouse that night, holding a glass of scotch, a rare vintage I had been saving. The city lights of Seattle twinkled below me like a sea of diamonds. Lily was inside, laughing on the phone with a friend from her MBA cohort. The sound of her happiness was the best music I had ever heard. I took a sip of the amber liquid. It tasted of oak and thyme. I realized then that I had won. But the victory was not in the glue. It was not in the prison sentences. It was not in Vanessa's red smock. The victory was here. It was in the peace of this balcony. It was in the fact that I could wake up in the morning without a knot of anxiety in my stomach. It was in the fact that my daughter looked at me with respect. It was in the fact that I was 50 years old, and I felt like my life was just beginning. The glue had bound them to their fate, but it had freed me to find mine. I turned my back on the view and walked back inside, sliding the glass door shut behind me. The air in the penthouse was warm and still. "Dad?" Lily called out from the kitchen. "Do you want to watch a movie?" "I would love to," I said. I sat down on the sofa, a sofa I had chosen in a life I had built. I was Thomas Williams, and for the first time in a century, or at least what felt like when I was home. The salt air of the Pacific Ocean has a way of clarifying the mind. Standing on the teak deck of the Vengeance. Yes, I named my yacht that, a private joke that only I find amusing. I looked out at the horizon where the deep blue of the water met the endless sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in hues of violet and burnt orange, a celestial firework display solely for my benefit. Today was my 50th birthday. Half a century of life on this planet. For most men, 50 is the age of crisis, the age of looking back at missed opportunities and fading youth. But as I swirled the amber liquid in my crystal glass, I felt younger, sharper, and more alive than I had at 25. The party was intimate. I did not want a crowd of sycophants drinking my expensive champagne. There were perhaps 20 people on board. Elena was there looking stunning in a silver evening gown that caught the fading light. She was chatting with a few of my business partners from Novatech. And then there was Lily. My daughter had organized this evening. She stood near the helm, holding a microphone, her silhouette framed against the twilight. She looked radiant. The shadows that had haunted her eyes for 2 years were gone, replaced by a steeliness that made me burst with pride. She was no longer a girl. She was a woman who had walked through fire and come out forged in iron. She tapped the microphone, drawing the attention of the guests. The soft murmur of conversation died down, replaced by the rhythmic lapping of waves against the hull. "Attention, everyone," Lily said, her voice clear and steady. "I would like to propose a toast to the birthday boy." I smiled, raising my glass slightly in acknowledgement. "Most daughters thank their fathers for the usual things," Lily continued, her eyes locking with mine across the deck. "For paying for college, for teaching them to drive, for being a shoulder to cry on. And I thank my dad for those things too. But today, on his 50th birthday, I want to thank him for something else, something unconventional." She paused, and a small, knowing smile played on her lips. "I want to thank him for a tube of Titan Bond industrial adhesive." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the guests who knew the story. Elena chuckled into her wineglass. "I am serious," Lily said, her voice dropping to a register of profound sincerity. 2 years ago, I was asleep. I was living in a dream that was actually a nightmare. I was married to a man who did not love me, and I was being betrayed by the mother who was supposed to protect me. I was blind. I was weak. I was suffocating in a web of lies so thick I could not move. She took a breath, clutching the microphone tighter. My dad could have just told me. He could have just shown me pictures. But he knew that would not be enough. He knew I was too stubborn, too brainwashed to believe it. So he did something drastic. He used a physical bond to break an emotional chain. He forced me to look at the ugly, naked truth. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it was the surgical cut that saved my life. That glue did not just trap 2 traitors, it woke me up. It glued my pieces back together in a way that is stronger than before. So, Dad, thank you for the tough love. Thank you for being the villain in their story so you could be the hero in mine." She raised her glass. "To Thomas Williams, the man who holds the keys." "To Thomas!" the guests chorused. I drank the toast, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the alcohol. I walked over to Lily and hugged her. She smelled of sea breeze and confidence. "Happy birthday, Dad," she whispered in my ear. "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied. "You are the best gift I could ask for." As the party resumed, I stepped away to the stern of the boat for a moment of solitude. I needed to check my messages, a habit from my days as a CFO that I could never quite break. I pulled my phone from my tuxedo pocket. There was a notification from an unknown number. I usually ignore these, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. The text was a wall of desperate, rambling words. "Thomas, please. It is Jared. I used a burner phone from the commissary. You have to help me. My appeal was denied. They are moving me to a higher security block next week. I am scared, Thomas. I will do anything. I will sign whatever you want. I know you have money. Please just post the bond. I will pay you back for the rest of my life. I am begging you. Do not let me die in here." I read the message twice. I imagine Jared sitting in a cold, concrete cell, his once handsome face gaunt and gray, his arrogance stripped away by the brutal reality of the federal penal system. I imagine the scars on his legs, aching in the damp prison air. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no satisfaction, just the indifference one feels when deleting a spam email. I did not reply. I did not type a witty retort. I simply tapped the block caller button. Then, I deleted the message thread. It was a digital execution, silent and final. Jared ceased to exist in my world. I leaned against the railing, looking down at the dark water churning in the yacht's wake. The white foam fascinated me. It appeared for a second, chaotic and turbulent, and then vanished into the deep, leaving no trace. Just like Vanessa and Jared. And now, my dear friends, as we reach the end of this tale, I feel I owe you one final confession. A small detail I have omitted until now. A twist, if you will. Throughout this story, you have seen me as a man who reacted. A man who came home early because of a snowstorm, stumbled upon a betrayal, and made a split-second decision to use a tube of glue he happened to have in his bag. You saw me as a victim who snapped. But that is not entirely true. You see, I did not find out about the affair on that Tuesday afternoon. I did not stumble upon them by accident. I knew. I had known for exactly 1 month prior to the incident. It was the audio surveillance. I was reviewing the logs one evening while Vanessa thought I was asleep. I heard them planning. I heard them laughing about Project Freedom. I heard them discussing how to induce a heart attack in me. My first instinct, naturally, was to storm into the room and throw them out. But then, the CFO in me took over. The risk analyst. If I acted, then it would be a messy divorce. Vanessa would claim half the assets. She would fight for the house. She would manipulate Lily. Jared would walk away with a bruised ego but free to continue leeching off my daughter. It would be a war of attrition that I might lose financially and emotionally. No. I needed a clean kill. I needed a nuclear option. So I waited. For 30 days I played the role of the oblivious, boring husband. I ate dinner across from the woman who was plotting my death. I shook hands with the son-in-law who was sleeping with my wife. It was the hardest acting job of my life. During those 30 days, I quietly moved my liquid assets. I contacted the forensic accountants. I set up the legal framework to crush the fraudulent mortgage. And the glue? I did not buy the Titan Bond to fix a shoe. My shoes are Italian leather. I do not fix them myself. I bought that tube of industrial adhesive 2 days before the trip to Chicago. I bought it specifically because I had read the chemical safety data sheet. I knew it caused an exothermic reaction. I knew it was permanent. I knew it would create a situation so humiliating, so medically complex, and so undeniable that it would destroy their credibility forever. And the snowstorm? There was no snowstorm in Chicago that day. The weather report was clear. I had chartered a private jet, but I canceled it myself. I sent the text to Vanessa saying flight canceled, while sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks away from our house. I knew their schedule. I knew Jared came over on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock because that was when Mrs. Higgins walked her dog, leaving the street empty. I watched them enter the house on my phone. I waited until the audio sensors confirmed they were in the bedroom. I waited until I heard the shower running. Then, and only then, did I drive into the driveway. I was not a victim stumbling into a crime scene. I was the director walking onto a set I had built, ready to film the climax. Was it cruel? Perhaps. Was it calculated? Absolutely. But when you are dealing with cancer, you do not use a Band-Aid. You use chemotherapy. You burn it out to save the host. I had to become a monster for one afternoon to save the rest of my life. I looked up from the water and saw Elena walking toward me, 2 glasses of champagne in her hands. She handed one to me. "You look deep in thought," she said, her smile warm and genuine. "Thinking about the past?" "No," I said, taking the glass. "I was just thinking about how perfectly everything adhered." She laughed, a sound that blended perfectly with the ocean breeze. "You and your glue metaphors. Come on, everyone is waiting for you to cut the cake." I turned back toward the party. The lights of the yacht were bright and inviting. My daughter was laughing. My friends were waiting. My future was wide open. I looked directly at you, the reader, the listener, the witness to my confession. Life is messy. People will betray you. They will try to break you. They will try to take what you have built. And sometimes the high road is not enough. Sometimes to build a solid foundation for the future, you have to use the strongest glue you can find to fix yourself, and you have to be willing to cut away the pieces that are too rotten to save. Do not be afraid to be the villain in their story, if it means you get to be the victor in yours. I raised my glass to the camera one last time. Cheers. I downed the champagne, took Elena's hand, and walked back into the light, leaving the darkness behind me forever. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope you found some satisfaction in how justice was served. Please, I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Drop a comment below with your city or country. Let us see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this tale of calm revenge, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, Calm Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who might need a reminder that sometimes the good guys do win. Stay sharp and stay safe.